We were here at Leighton House. This is called Leighton House. And well, he was a lord, wasn't he?
Lord Leighton,
yeah, Lord Leighton.
Frederick Leighton.
He was a painter, and very intrigued by Muslim architecture and art. But we're with Karima bint Dawood, and you're actually, you have a very interesting story, which is why we wanted to talk to you today. First of all, you converted to Islam like myself many, many years ago, and you come from family here in England, and you worked in the, you were actually a makeup artist. And a lot of people don't associate that with, but it really is an art form, isn't it, being in makeup. And you worked in modeling, and one of the things that we visited a plastic surgeon in Dubai.
Oh no!
And part of the reason we did that is because one of the things about that I really find problematic about the social conditions of women is there's so much emphasis on look and the form and the outward. It becomes an obsession, and in that industry it's very clear that it is at the levels of obsession, and then they have just an immense impact on young people because you have these models that I'm sure you noted were often anorexic, bulimic, but you want to tell us just a little bit about your journey, your story?
I was in search of the truth. A long time ago, somebody, an Iranian, showed me a book called In Search of the Truth, and I was really in Jahiliyyah. I was really clubbing in the 80s and everything. I don't know, it's all very empty for me, the 80s. It was all very superficial, and it just wasn't enough for me. I always knew that I was intelligent, mashallah, and I had more to me than just the way that I looked. And I even worked as a model as well in Switzerland and Germany and Paris. I was obviously very skinny and on speed and, really bad. Like you said, most people can't stay naturally skinny without being on some form of drugs. Drugs.
A lot of people don't realize that.
They're drugs. Yeah. They're drugs. You can call them slimming tablets, but they're drugs. They're class A drugs. And it was just empty for me. And because I'd looked at different faiths, Hinduism, Buddhism, I was searching, I was looking at lots of different things, and just people gave me dawah. And for me, Islam had a lot of rights for women, and I'd been to lots of places where women go to clubs and modelling and, jet set life. I've been to Cannes and film festival as guests of famous people and stuff. But I was always a token. I was always some rich guy's token trophy. And I didn't like it because I had an opinion and I had a brain, and I knew that God had given me a brain and feelings, and I was always had a sense of justice about me. And I wanted to belong to part of something that had order and structure, and everything was written down, because I was just fed up of the goalposts keep moving, which they do with my opinion and your opinion at the end of the day. And Islam also offered me that I would be judged on what I do, not what I look like, which was very important for me because I'd always been judged on what I looked like, and it wasn't good enough for me because I wanted people to know me for my person.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the, Dr. Winter describes the hijab as a moral raincoat from the storms of glances.
It is.
Because he said basically when you don't have that, the interesting thing, tabarruj in Arabic, which is the word used to describe women that don't wear the hijab. Tabarraj, if a woman tabarrajat, it means that she intentionally is displaying herself for others. It's actually, she wants to cause an effect. And that's her intention in it, which is very interesting because in our culture, so much of that is really imposed upon women. I mean, there's an element, obviously, that women enjoy that, and many men do as well, being noticed.
But can I say something, please? There's also an element that some women are not even aware of what they're doing. I think I was about 20 and I was on the tube one day. It was a hot day. I had on jeans, a t-shirt, and I was going to a photo session, and there was a man sitting opposite me on the train with a Sherlock Holmes outfit on, the whole, moustache and everything. And he was sexually, I don't know what to say, being abusive to himself because of me. And I was young. I was about 18 years old. I didn't know what to do. I knew something was happening. And I got to the studio, because I used to do makeup then, and I was really angry, I was really annoyed, and I said, I'm only wearing jeans and a t-shirt. You know, the jeans were sprayed on, they were so tight, you could see everything. The t-shirt, you could see my tummy.
Right.
So I was like, why is a man getting excited about me? These are just jeans, I'm just wearing jeans. And because of the culture and maybe parenting, some young people, particularly young girls, are not aware of the effect that they're having. Some are.
In a lot of the social sciences, they've shown that men are far more interested in objects and women are far more interested in actual inner communication and process. My wife told me yesterday that she was driving in the car, and my son's only 14, but he's got quite an extensive vocabulary. And he said to her, Mom, I think men are more lustful than women.
Oh,
and she said, she looked at him, she was a little shocked. She said, what do you mean? And he pointed to a truck that had, in America there's these trucks, they put a silhouette of a naked woman on the back of the truck. And he said, a woman would never put a naked man on the back of her car. For me, I really see Islam and the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ as an antidote to so much of this madness, because there is a type of madness. It becomes obsessive, it becomes harmful for people. It also detracts immensely from far more important things in their lives.
I have to say, I do not wear this on the street. I don't dress
It's okay
like...
to look nice. Let's not forget.
Oh no, it's okay to
You
look
don't
nice.
need to apologize, Karima. Yeah.
No, I'm just making a point
You look
to...
fine.
No,
It goes
my
well
shoulder,
with the blue tiles.
Yeah, the tiles. But
Yeah.
most of the time, I'm like this. I just wear black jalaba, etc., because I've got more important things to do.
But see, I would rather have the woman, the Muslim woman, if she can't get beyond that, to be dressing stylishly or whatever, but still adhering to these limits that are put there, because those limits are there. You know, تِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ فَلَا تَعْتَدُوهَا. You know, these are the limits of God, and don't transgress the limits. If you don't believe in it, that's fine. That's another thing, because la ikraha fid din. You know, there's no coercion in the religion. You shouldn't impose people. I'm also quite, you know, especially in the West, with women who aren't wearing the hijab, I've found some women who do not wear the hijab to be far more devout and far more committed to Islam than many women that I've met that wear the hijab. And I say that without any hesitation. I mean, I really have met, it's a level of commitment. There's some people that don't realize that, you know, that it is something that is, I wouldn't say it's central to the deen, but it's certainly, if you look at an orange, the purpose of the skin is to protect the fruit. Exactly. And so the hijab is, to me, it's like that. It's just a protection, but also males. I mean, men, I don't wear tight pants, and I really don't think men should do it as well, or, you know, tight clothes. I don't wear short sleeve shirts. I don't have a problem with men who do, but you know, I was taught that men should dress modestly.
Well, what was it like for you? I mean, you were really wrapped up in this world for a really long time, and it was, you know, probably even worse for you than some people that just deal with the everyday. No, not to diminish everyone's problems that they deal with the dunya every single day, but how did you separate yourself, and how did you, I mean, it must have been a complete transformation to separate from your friends, from the people you were seeing, and from that whole industry, I guess.
No. There's, please help me out here. There's, no, because just these quotes and stuff. I thought I'd read somewhere, Islamically in the Quran or Hadith, that it's better to be on your own and eat grass than to be with bad company. So I remember this, and these type of things are the words of Allah. They're from God. They're not from, you know, anybody, human being. They're from God, and they're there for a reason, and they're things for us to hold on to when the wind is blowing, you know, for us to hold on tight to these things. And so I just got to a point, which was normally Ramadan, where I had a good clear out, not just of my body, but also of acquaintances. And before, it was interesting to come home and see there were no messages on my voice machine, because I told certain people, please, there's a line here and don't go over this line, you know, and who do you think you are? And then that's shaitan whispering, who do you think you are? You know, you're a noble human being. And I think that's one of the things we've lost. Or losing some of the Muslims, this concept, I would like you, nobility. Every prophet has come to teach us to be noble. If you ask most Muslims, what does it mean? What does noble mean? What does it mean? They tell you about cars, big flat screen TVs. You know what, for me, these people are miskeen. They're miskeen for me because their heart is miskeen, their heart is poor, and they have all these things, lots of things.
You know, one of the most noble, it was so beautiful, I'll just give you an example of this. When I took my boys to visit Hamza at Uhud, we went to say salam, and when they finished, they had a little man there who was selling little sweets, and so I wanted the kids to have a nice experience. So I gave one of my boys 5 riyals, and I said, go buy some sweets, and I said, just give the man the change. So they went and they got the sweets, and the man he refused to take the change. And I said, I told him, no, tell him I want him to keep his. He went back. The man refused, and then I went up and I said, you know, we wanted to give you. He said, look, he said, I'm a tajir. And he said, ana tajir. He was like a Bedouin, you know, miskeen. And he said, that's what it costs. I'm not here for charity. You know, this is my...
That's karama.
No, it's karamat al-insan. I was so impressed with that because he really, you know, that was it. And it was also qana'a. You know, it was that thing of being content. He obviously didn't need the charity, and he didn't want the charity, and he wanted that transaction. You know, may your work always be noble work.
Inshallah,
may Allah increase
ameen.
you in your tawfiq. We really appreciate having you here with us in this really beautiful...
And your lovely questions. I wish we could have more time together, inshallah.
So, thank you very much, Karima.
Welcome.
Inshallah, I hope
all the same for all your work as well. Your book is really feeding me. It's like a thali, you know, Indian thali, where you've got lots and lots of different dishes. I can just kind of like eat just a little bit, I have to go, digest it and that sort of thing. So may Allah always keep you on Sirat al-Mustaqeen, and all of you, inshallah.
Thank you very much.
Inshallah, you're most welcome.
It's been really good.
Today we're meeting with a journalist from the UK, Isla Rosa Owen, and you, among other things, you're a first-generation Muslim born into a family of converts to Islam from the British Isles, which is still a reasonably small group of people, but increasing. And people like yourself are coming of age and beginning to have their own impact on the culture. So you have it's a web journal called Al-Qalam, QALAM.com. And you've been writing for a very long time. I think at a very early age you were recognized as having quite gifted at writing. So I think at 17 you were already in an association of journalists.
Chartered Institute.
Yeah, Chartered Institute, right. So that was quite unusual. I mean, not many people at that age.
Yeah, I think they said I was the youngest.
The youngest ever.
Person,
okay, great. Well, just to start off, I'm interested in, I mean, you've written a lot about a lot of the topics affecting British Muslims. Initially, I'm curious what your experience was like as a daughter of converts in this country, growing up in a Muslim community that's predominantly immigrant and children of immigrants, and often associate the Muslim community solely with the immigrant experience. And then your experience with the more dominant community who assume
that if you wear a hijab, that you must be from somewhere else or originally from somewhere else. So what was that like?
And I think in terms of identity, it was very confusing because on the one hand, you don't really feel you fit into the Muslim community either. And then you're obviously ostracized to some extent from the host community. So I think a lot of people like myself had very confusing upbringings in a way, because you don't really fit into anyone's boxes.
Which is troubling for me because I have 5 children that are going through your experience.
I just wanted to ask you, what is your perception of Muslim women?
I believe that Muslim women follow Islam and that they are very strict in their dress and in their belief system, that they value family life, and I can't think of anything else.
I want to take you and mollycoddle you and say, come to our world.
How is your world? Tell me, do you feel that Western women have a better position than Muslim women?
I'd say so, yes.
Why do you say that?
Because of our freedom more than anything.
From what I say, we get to wear what we want, we get to work where we want, we basically get to do whatever we want at home.
Their clothes, usually. And I don't know, I think it's too different to this word, and I don't know if in my case I would like.
Do you think if someone told you that you needed to put on the veil, the same one that we wore, and you had to cover yourself up, you could do the same things that you do, go to school and everything like that, do you think you would feel restricted in some way?
I do think that, I guess in some way, I do think that perhaps people might treat me differently because I look different, I'm wearing different clothes.
I think you go through stages where you try and fit in with various different groups, and then eventually, I guess you just stop worrying about it and get on with things. But
what do you, in your writings, you focus on a lot of the Muslim issues, and what are your primary interest and concerns?
I suppose British Islam, and mainly. And then I guess women's issues inevitably come into it as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I heard that you do a lot of work on the issues of polygamy.
It was mainly to do with attitudes that people have.
What did you find, basically?
A real mix, actually, quite an interesting mix. A lot of people are obviously very apprehensive about it, very condemnatory, particularly from certain countries. But then I spoke to a lot of Nigerians who were very open to it. So I think it did come down to cultural
In fact, Muslims in
as well.
Nigeria are conservative polygynists because in the Igbo community and other Nigerian communities, they marry often more than 4.
Yeah.
More than 4.
Yeah.
And it's, exactly, and it's not just a Muslim phenomenon in many African countries.
Why were you interested in it? Because, I understand that here in Britain anyways, it's not an issue really, is it?
It's becoming an issue.
How?
You have a lot of converts, usually very young women.
And they're not protected by law, obviously, correct?
Yeah.
So how does that work?
So you get all sorts of varying practices, and obviously all sorts of abuses as well.
A lot of abuses. I've seen personally a lot of really troubling abuses. There's a lot of people that have married in the U.S. for green cards.
Sure, exactly.
The women actually convert quite seriously to Islam, and then when the husband gets the green card, they're literally dumped. And it's quite devastating because this person's been, expressing love and care and concern, and then the day the green card arrives in the mail, suddenly the personality changes. Unfortunately, it is sad, but the victim is not just the woman in that case, but Islam itself is the victim, because Islam is often used as a kind of justification.
What do you think about the issue of polygamy in Islam?
I don't agree with it. I don't agree with polygamy. I don't agree with having more than... No, it's not right.
Well, I think if the woman doesn't mind, then it's absolutely fine.
If I was put in the situation, I don't think I'd be too happy about it. But if you agree to it, then I think it's absolutely fine.
I believe in the classical notion that everybody was born as half of a sphere and they go around trying to find their soulmate. And I don't believe that you can find more than one person that you're intended to be with. And I don't know if I'm a traditional kind of person or if I'm conventional as such, but
well, it just
I
misses
think you
the
should
point of our conceptions of marriage.
And I believe
it's a choice.
Exactly,
but
exactly.
It's not how we were raised to view marriage, because you know, marriage for us is about two people, not 8.
Yeah. One of the major problems really in the UK is that people are just not brought up with that much knowledge, and so you find a lot of people who may have opinions and may want to contribute them, but they don't really feel confident enough to do that because they don't feel
This is Muslim women?
Yeah, and men as well. And you see that a lot, I think. They don't really feel that their opinion is valid because they don't have the knowledge.
It's not based on the Quran or the Sunnah. And then another problem is that the tradition is a tradition that really does give guidance for very specific things, and it gets quite detailed. And even though there are varying opinions about that, what invariably happens with that is that these tools begin to be used as forms of oppression. You know, can I ask you, just in growing up in a Muslim household, and probably as you came of age, realizing, one, your society was entirely different from the worldview that you'd been given by your parents. Did you go through a dark night of the soul? Did you?
Yeah, I think everyone does up to a point. Probably when I was at university, you do a lot of soul searching there anyway. And it is a confusing time because you realize you get on better with your non-Muslim colleagues perhaps than your Muslim colleagues for whatever reason. You know, I mean, you perhaps read too much into it at the time, but and then eventually I did get distracted by that world of parties and all the rest of it. But then you realise that there's just no substance in it, and I began looking for something with
deeper,
more meaning.
Yeah.
So, and eventually, after various phases or whatever, I sort of ended up in a place where I was comfortable with who I am. But yeah, I think inevitably you do go through that, especially in the West.
In a recent Gallup poll that was done, and there was actually a Muslim involved in it, they found that all over the world that optimism was directly related to socioeconomic status. The higher the people were in their standards of living, the more optimism there were. The Muslim countries were the only countries that broke that rule. They found that, yes, they were the only ones. And they were quite struck by that fact, that the Muslims, in spite of living in the worst type of conditions, were actually very optimistic. And they attribute it directly to a faith that inculcates optimism. But I want to thank you very much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure.
And inshallah, Allah give you tawfiq in your work.
Thank you.